Brandon Sanderson, the author of the Mistborn series and the author who finished the Wheel of Time series after Robert Jordan's death, has finally reacted to the show's cancellation by Amazon MGM Studios and Prime Video. My co-owner at Phantom Pulse, John Della Rose, wrote this over at phantompulse.com. You can find the link in the description below. And we're just going to kind of jump down here to what Brandon Sanderson had to say following the show's cancellation. He says, "I wasn't really involved. Don't know anything more than what is public. They told me they were renegotiating and thought it would work out. Then I heard nothing for 2 months. Then learned this from the news like everyone else. I do think it's a shame, as while I had my problems with the show, it had a fan base who deserved better than a cancellation after the best season." I 100% disagree with this. We know, and John actually included it here in this article, that the showrunner, Rafe Judkins, has basically taken the Wheel of Time property that Robert Jordan had worked on, that Brandon Sanderson had worked on, and turned it into LGBTQ plus propaganda. He admitted this in an interview with The Hollywood Reporter, where he said it felt essential that their relationship, he's talking about Moraine and Siwan, saying it felt essential that their relationship be textual. It is one of the most important relationships in the books for how it drives plot. It's almost like the inciting incident of the show is contained within the relationship between these two. To me, the show didn't make sense without that relationship being explicit, because we're also putting more of the emphasis, certainly, on Rosamund Pike's character Moraine than there is in the books. You're also always looking as an artist for, why am I telling this story? I have to devote my life to this for years and years. It was worth devoting my life to telling this beautiful story, but also that the lead was a queer character. I've never seen a fantasy show where a lead was just casually a queer character that wasn't only directed at the queer community. To have that was an important part of why I wanted to tell this story and why I fell in love with the books in the first place. There's lots of other stuff that he says in that interview with The Hollywood Reporter. I've covered it in a number of videos, but it's pretty clear that he had turned the show into LGBTQ plus propaganda. So, nevertheless, Sanderson goes on and says, "I won't miss being largely ignored. They wanted my name on it for legitimacy, but not to involve me in any meaningful way." So I think that is a massive change in the narrative from how Brandon Sanderson was positioning himself with the show over the last couple of years, where he made it explicitly clear that he was indeed consulting on the show. He was providing them a number of notes, and that they were actually taking some of advice and heeding what he had to say. Now, he also admitted they weren't taking everything that he had to say, but they were indeed listening to his notes and taking some of his advice. I mean, to that point, you can look at what he wrote here about episode 3 from the first season. He's talking about the Tinkers. He says, "Do we have to make the people following the way of the leaf into ominous dark figures in ragged clothing with terrible dogs? I really feel like this one is going to rub fans the wrong way and make the series try so hard to be dark and ominous all the time that it starts to be too much. It feels like the story is trying really, really hard to say, look, we can be like Game of Thrones. Notice how like Game of Thrones we can be. That's not letting it be itself, or be the Wheel of Time, which has light sequences and characters who are genuine friends and strong world building." And he says that it feels like Judkins made an effort to lighten the mood with the rest of the Tinker scenes, and I thought they turned out great. So he obviously provided this advice to them, and then he's seemingly admitting that they did indeed take that advice, right, and did indeed lighten the mood with the rest of the scenes. Nevertheless, he went on and said, "So my only gripe remains in the ominous approach. It's a small thing, but I think it's something to watch for in this adaptation, as the story is walking a line between being authentic to the Wheel of Time and going for that darker tone." So he did indeed provide them a note, and it looks like, even from his own acknowledgement here, that they did indeed kind of listen to what he had to say and made changes to the rest of the Tinker scenes. And again, that's from season 1. Now, whether or not they had kind of changed working with him after season 1, that's possible. But clearly, he was seemingly not being largely ignored. I think that it was not the case, especially when we look at what he had previously written about the show and the notes that he had given. Now, as far as them wanting his name on it for legitimacy, I think that was obvious, right? Like, clearly they wanted his name on the show to provide it legitimacy. And then also, I think, handheld him in his criticisms for the show. When he was providing criticisms, he was always have to like say like, "Oh, I love this thing," and then he would criticize that. And he did that. He did that in where does he say here? He did that at the end of season 2, right? in this live stream that he did. He says the show is doing a lot of things fantastically and it's really good at scenes. But one of the things I keep arguing for is what are the arcs? What is the theme? And arc and theme seems to fall by the wayside for cool scenes quite a bit. And that worries me, particularly going into Book 4, where it's the strongest Wheel of Time book. And that's partially because of the themes of self-sacrifice and things like this. So he's always kind of like prefacing his criticisms by like giving this kind of like praise, right, for the show. And I think he's doing that because he was getting paid by Amazon MGM Studios. He wasn't actually telling us what he really thought about the show. So not only was Amazon getting his legitimacy, but they were also basically tying his hands behind his back. And I don't think they were doing that physically, right? I don't think there was like, you can't say this, because he clearly was sharing his criticisms, but I think it was something that he basically was like self-censoring himself, right? He was doing that to himself in order to maybe try and keep that consulting deal. So I think he sold out, right? I think he took the money. He knew that they were paying him for the legitimacy, and he made that deal. So now he's going to complain about it, and I just think that's just absurd. You made the deal, own it. So just ridiculous from Brandon Sanderson right here. But I mean, this is what we see from Hollywood, right? This is what they do over and over and over again. George R. R. Martin has said this time and time again. As much as I criticize George R. R. Martin, I will praise him for this, right? He says, everywhere you look, there are more screenwriters and producers eager to take great stories and make them their own. It does not seem to matter whether the source material was written by Stan Lee, Charles Dickens, Ian Fleming, Roald Dahl, Ursula K. Le Guin, J.R. Tolkien, Mark Twain, Raymond Chandler, Jane Austen, Orwell, anyone. No matter how major a writer it is, no matter how great the book, there always seems to be someone on hand who thinks he can do better, eager to take the story and improve on it. And John says, if these Hollywood producers can't honor the source material and lore, there's going to be a lot more failures incoming. And Brandon Sanderson is right to express frustration in the process and in his exclusion. Although I'm not sure how much he was actually excluded, given the fact that we did see that he was providing them significant amount of notes. They were giving him scripts, etc., and he was providing feedback to them. And it does look like they, even by his own admission, that they were actually accepting that feedback, at least with season 1. Now, whether or not they continue doing that with season 2, season 3, unclear what that is. But they were clearly doing that in season 1. So interesting comments here from Brandon Sanderson. I'm sure we'll get some more commentary from him moving forward. He does like to update his website pretty regularly, and obviously he does his YouTube show as well. So I'm sure he'll be providing quite a bit more information about this. I do find it also interesting here that he says they were renegotiating and thought it would work out. And then obviously it didn't work out and it was canceled. And I think that's because the viewership was absolutely abysmal. Nielsen came out with some ratings for the 2024-2025 TV season, and I think Wheel of Time only clocked in at like 1.9 million viewers, which was kind of surprising to me. That was obviously reported by Variety through Nielsen because Daredevil was higher than it, but not by much. But Daredevil never actually charted on the Nielsen charts, whereas Wheel of Time was charting with total minutes viewed. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Maybe just a lot of rewatch then happening with Wheel of Time, whereas Daredevil might have actually had more unique viewers. So something to think about there. So maybe there was like, I guess, a dedicated fan base or something was going on there with the viewership with Wheel of Time. Clearly not as much as what we thought with the Nielsen weekly releases, where it was doing something like 500 million minutes, I think, when it first had that first 3 episodes or whatever came out. And it still stayed pretty strong towards the middle of the season, but then obviously it fell off. But Nielsen saying only 1.9 million people watched the show up to the beginning of April. So not good there. Obviously a reason why the show was getting canned. And we've seen this, right? We saw this even with the first season, the massive drop in viewership, just looking at those Nielsen weekly numbers. And this is something we've seen with these Amazon shows that don't respect the source material, like The Rings of Power as well. So hopefully maybe that one gets canceled after they release the 3rd season as well, although we know they have some 5-season deal in place. But I think they've already started making significant amounts of cuts to that show, given the lack of response from viewers. I think 63% in the United States watched the first season and didn't finish it, showing that how bad it actually was. But it also showed there was obviously significant interest in the show, because I think it was like 1.9 billion or something like that million minutes watched for the first for that premiere for Rings of Power. People wanted a good J.R.R. Tolkien Lord of the Rings story, and they completely and utterly botched it. But anyways, let me know what you guys make of this. What do you make of what Brandon Sanderson had to say here, his reaction to the Wheel of Time getting scrapped? Let me know in the comments below. Remember to always be charitable, especially to each other, and to always, always speak the truth.
Why would you be afraid of the people? Why are you not afraid of God instead of man?